Hey guys, guess what? Today is adoption day for Scarlett. I officially adopted her this morning, so woo!
We got adopted! Yay! Yay! We officially are adopted. Yay!
Alright, we have to watch this now, okay?
You watching?
Oh. Okay, we got a little carried away. Anyway, we left off last time. Alexander the Great had basically started to take over the entire Persian Empire. Darius, as they say, is out. Alexander is in. And this is actually part 4. This is the last episode that Epic History TV does on Alexander the Great. There is another one called, like, The Greatest Speech of All Time or something, which we'll do after this. But I guess we're going to see just how far Alexander got, and maybe also, I know he died really young, so maybe this will also cover his death and, you know, how his reign came to an end. Appreciate all of you guys answering my questions on the last video, and I feel stupid kind of because I did ask, like, how do people know that all of this stuff happened? I guess I was more, you know, asking about how the details of the battle were recorded, because they were going over some really detailed maneuvers and stuff, and I didn't know if they like had somebody like on the battlefield recording exactly what happened or what, you know, and it's a huge battlefield, so it's probably hard to like see everything that's happening. But I do know that there are historians even back in that day. I actually do have the histories by Herodotus, and I actually also have the history of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, so I should have thought about that when I asked that question, but I guess I was, you know, I haven't read these books yet because they're very dense and I think hard to kind of get through, but you know, they're on my bucket list for reading them one day. We'll just go ahead and get into Alexander the Great, part 4, and let's see what happens.
Of just 22, Alexander, ruler of the small Greek kingdom of Macedonia, had led an invasion of the vast Persian Empire.
22.
After a string of victories, he smashed Persian military power at the Battle of Gaugamela and took the Persian throne for himself. Now, in 330 BC, Alexander continued his march east. His goal, to find and kill Bessus, a Persian usurper claiming to be the rightful king, and to subjugate the empire's eastern provinces.
By the way, I had a question about that guy. I was like, what happened to him? And you guys were like, you're not listening. They just said what happened to him. I've explained this in the past. You know how like when you watch movies or TV shows or whatever, and the second time or the third time through, you notice things that you didn't notice the first time? You know, it's like that. So if I miss something that seems obvious to you guys, just, you have to go easy on me here. And I just, again, I appreciate you guys answering questions. If I miss something in the video, then, you know, I can't help it. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix that. You know, appreciate you guys being patient with me and answering my questions.
Alexander headed first for Aria, today part of Afghanistan, where the Persian governor Satibarzanes had launched a revolt after initially pretending to submit to Alexander. The rebellion was crushed and Satibarzanes killed in single combat by a Greek cavalry officer. Nearby, Alexander founded the city of Alexandria Ariana, modern Herat, one of around a dozen cities that Alexander would eventually found, almost all bearing his name.
Of course.
Alexander marched on to Frada. The Macedonian court had a long tradition of plots and assassination. 6 years before,
screaming.
Alexander's own father, King Philip, had been murdered by his bodyguard. He was now informed that Philotas, commander of his companion cavalry, had uncovered a plot to assassinate Alexander, but kept it secret. Philotas and his father Parmenion were among the most respected of Alexander's commanders, and had played crucial roles in all his great victories. But when Philotas confessed, under torture, Alexander had him executed, then sent assassins back to Ecbatana, where Parmenion was governor, to kill him before he even heard of his son's death, and had a chance to turn against Alexander. In 329, Alexander resumed his pursuit of Bessus. En route, he founded the city of Alexandria Arachosia, modern Kandahar in southern Afghanistan. As he reached Kunduz, Bessus was betrayed by his own men and handed over in chains. Alexander sent him back to Persia for execution as a kingslayer.
Great.
Alexander pushed on into modern Tajikistan, where the Sogdians rose up against him. He had to fight off attacks by local tribes and take several towns by assault. On the banks of the Jaxartes River, he founded the city of Alexandria Escate, meaning Alexandria the Furthest, so named because he had, at last, reached the limit of the Persian Empire.
What about the parts on north and south that are still purple there? Like, why is that not taken by him or whatever? Also, what is this mountain range that he's up against right here as well? I'm assuming that he's not going to go any further than that, because that would probably be really, really difficult to get through those mountains. Are those the Himalayas, actually? Because that's right above India, right? I feel horribly stupid if that's not the Himalayas, but I think that's what they are. What are these mountains between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, though? I'm also really, really curious, why did he not go into Europe? Or is that coming? He goes to the Persian Empire, but he hasn't really bothered with Europe at all, except for, you know, the immediate areas surrounding Greece. I guess because he just felt like he had to take over the Persian Empire because they were the most powerful or whatever, and he needed to, like, dethrone them in order to, I guess, rule the world or whatever. But it's really interesting to me that he chose to go that direction, and he hasn't really done anything in Europe yet.
This frontier was frequently raided by nomads, known to the Greeks as Scythians. Alexander lured them into a decisive battle near the Jaxartes. The result was a crushing victory for the Macedonian king that put an end to the raids. But fighting against Bactrian and Sogdian tribes continued, frustrating Alexander and tying him down in a difficult guerrilla war.
You gonna get murdered?
By now, many of the Macedonian troops were unhappy with Alexander. Most had not seen their homes in years, but their king seemed bent on conquest without end. What was worse, he'd begun to adopt the rituals and dress of their defeated Persian enemy, customs they viewed as effeminate and decadent. At Marakanda, modern Samarkand, after a furious drunken argument, Alexander killed Clytus the Black. Clytus had been one of Alexander's best generals, and the man who'd saved his life at the Battle of the Granicus.
Is this necessary? Slow motion.
Alexander was full of remorse, but his growing arrogance was alienating more and more old comrades. When he tried to make his countrymen perform the traditional Persian ritual of proskynesis, prostrating themselves before the king, he crossed a line. To Greeks, this was blasphemy. Only a god was worthy of such respect, and Alexander was forced to back down. In Bactria, another plot to assassinate Alexander was uncovered. This time the ringleader was a royal page, one of the sons of Macedonian nobility who attended the king. Hermolaus had become murderously bitter towards Alexander over a perceived injustice. He and his accomplices were tortured and then stoned to death. Callisthenes, Alexander's official historian, was also implicated in the conspiracy. He was thrown in prison, where he later died. That summer, in 327, according to legend, Alexander became captivated by the beauty of Roxana, daughter of a Bactrian lord. Their marriage was also a sound political move, helping to end local revolt against his rule, and allowing him to continue his advance into modern Pakistan and India.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Alexander now prepared to subdue the Persian Empire's most eastern provinces, which had yet to recognize his kingship. To do so, he would first have to cross the Hindu Kush mountains and reach the Indus River valley. Advancing in two columns, his army won a series of skirmishes against the Aspasi and Asakani as they fought their way into what's now the Swat Valley of northern Pakistan. After a fierce siege, Alexander took the Asakanian capital of Masaga. According to legend, it was ruled by a beautiful queen, Cleophas, who bore Alexander a son and was allowed to keep her throne.
Okay.
The ruler of Taxila, near modern Islamabad, had formed an alliance with Alexander. Together, they marched to face Porus, king of Paravas, at the Battle of the Hydaspes.
Why is he doing this through the mountains in the north instead of like going back south where it might be, I don't know what the terrain is like, but I mean, maybe there aren't as many mountains down south? Why is he doing it? It seems like he's doing it the hard way, but I guess the capital was up there, so he felt like he had to go to the capital or something. I don't know. It just seemed, oh, here we have elephants again.
It was Alexander's costliest battle, as Porus's war elephants inflicted terrible casualties amongst the Greeks. But despite Porus's fearless leadership, the battle ended in a decisive victory for Alexander, winning him control of the Punjab. Alexander wanted to push on into India to reach the great river, which ancient Greek geographers said formed the edge of the world. But at the river Hyphasis, known today as the Bias, his army mutinied.
Oh.
His men
stretched
had
too
marched
far,
thousands of miles, fought countless battles, and not seen their homes in 8 years. They'd heard rumors of gigantic armies waiting for them in India. They refused to go any further. Alexander was furious, but had to turn the army around.
You know what? This just goes to show that it's the masses that give, like, dictators their power. Like, the dictators don't really have any real true power, I feel like. All it takes is just people just refusing to go along with whatever they say. They're not this great person that, you know, history remembers them as. It's just really weird. I guess it's just like the mass psychology, you know, or whatever that kind of drives, you know, I guess they're pretty big manipulators of people too, you know, that, you know, they kind of manipulate their way into that power. It's just really interesting. Like, you can turn things around just like that if you just start saying, no, we're not going to go along with whatever you want now. I don't know, it just kind of like makes these great people like Napoleon and Alexander and Hitler a little bit more human when you think about it in that way, that they don't really have any more power than anybody else does, because we are the ones that give them that power. I don't know if that makes any sense.
He followed the rivers of the Punjab to the sea, a journey that took 10 months. On the way, he defeated the Malians, but while leading the assault on their capital, was wounded in the chest and nearly killed. On reaching the coast, part of the army under Nearchus boarded ships and returned to Persia by sea, sailing through the Straits of Hormuz and entering the Persian Gulf. It was one of the great ancient voyages of exploration, as these waters had been previously unknown to Greeks. Meanwhile, Alexander led the rest of the army back by land through the Gedrosian Desert, today in southern Pakistan. But extreme heat and shortages of food and water led to terrible suffering and many deaths among his army.
I guess that's why they didn't go the southern route then. Maybe it was ultimately easier just to go through the mountains than to deal with the desert in the south, I guess.
On his return to Persia, Alexander executed several of his viceroys and governors, men accused of ruling unjustly and robbing temples and tombs during his long absence in the east. At Susa, he arranged a magnificent mass marriage of Macedonian officers to 80 Persian noblewomen to strengthen bonds between his two kingdoms. Alexander himself married 2 Persian princesses. He also paid all his soldiers' debts and ordered 30,000 youths from across the empire to be trained in the Macedonian art of war. But at Opis, his Macedonian troops mutinied. They were offended by Alexander's apparent preference for Persian advisors and Persian ways. Alexander had the ringleaders executed and made a speech to the men reminding them of the glories they'd won together, and leading eventually to an emotional reconciliation. At Ecbatana, Alexander's closest and most trusted friend, Hephaestion, died of fever. The king was grief-stricken, went days without eating, and ordered a period of public mourning across the empire. Alexander waged a successful campaign against the mountain raiders of Kossia, who not even the Persian kings had been able to subdue. Returning to Babylon, he was met by embassies from distant peoples, come to recognize his greatness. Ethiopians, Libyans, European Scythians, Lucanians, Etruscans, Gauls, and Iberians. Alexander's Bactrian wife, Roxana, was now pregnant. But as he planned his next campaign to Arabia and beyond, he developed a sudden fever and died days later.
Oh, he died from
32.
He got sick, okay.
The cause of Alexander's death has never been established. It may have been malaria, cholera, typhus, or poison.
I actually did not realize he made it to 32. I thought he died in his 20s, so he was older than I thought he was going to be. I also thought he might be murdered, you know, the way things were going with everybody, you know, in his circle killing each other, basically, or whatever. That's one thing I've learned in a lot of these videos is you know what? I don't think I would want it to be like part of the royal family or married a king or anything, because the odds of you being like executed are pretty high, it seems like.
Alexander died undefeated in battle. His reputation as a brilliant, fearless, and daring military commander
stay on this picture for as long as we can. Oh my god.
His decade-long campaign created one of the largest empires ever known, stretching from Greece to Pakistan. But it was vast and unstable, held together only by his own brilliance and name. Alexander left no plans for his succession, and his generals soon began fighting among themselves to carve out their own empires. In the wars of the successors, Alexander's widow Roxana and his young son were murdered. His own gold sarcophagus, en route to Macedonia for burial, was hijacked and ended up in Alexandria in Egypt. Today, its location remains one of the world's great unsolved mysteries. Few men have ever had such an impact on the course of history as Alexander the Great. The breathtaking achievements of his short life ushered in the Hellenistic Age, as Greek ideas spread across the territory of his former empire, fusing with local traditions to trigger new developments in art, science, government, and language. Some of the successor kingdoms to his great empire were short-lived. Others endured for centuries. But all, in turn, would fall to new forces. And in the West, to the rising power of Rome.
Okay, you know, towards the end there, I realized that I have absolutely no knowledge of, like, how all of the empires, like, who was who and when and where and all of that stuff. I was under the impression that Alexander the Great took over a lot more of Europe. You know, looking at this, it was pretty much just the Middle East. Like, he had a little bit of Greece, but other than that, it was all the Middle East basically is what he conquered, and he didn't really do much in Europe like I thought he had. So this was a very new perspective for me. That also last bit about the Hellenistic Age. I, again, am not familiar with the timeline of like science and, you know, all of that. I do know that a lot of math and science came out of the Middle Eastern area of the world. I also know it came out of Greece and Egypt as well. And I think, you know, Egypt, you know, did their stuff before Alexander, you know, got there. I don't know about the Middle East though. I don't know, was it the Greeks that inspired that stuff to come out of the Middle East, or was that already established there before the Greeks got there? Because it said that it spread some of these Greek ideas to these other parts of the world, which basically was the Middle East from what I could tell. So I don't really know the timeline of all of that and how all of that went down and what influenced what, you know, and all of that stuff. So that's something that I still have to get sorted out. Interesting also that the Romans are about to come in at this point as well. You know, also towards the end, it was just like, okay, Alexander's dead, so all of his commanders are gonna start, you know, they just get greedy, you know, and they're like, I want to be an emperor too. And so they start, you know, killing each other and fighting wars over, you know, because they want to be an emperor. And then like his son and his wife get killed or whatever, as murdered. It just like underscores how selfish and greedy humans can be and just how destructive we can be because of those things, you know. I know not all of history is bad, and I know that not all of human accomplishments or whatever are bad. Like, we've done a lot of really awesome things as well. I tell you what, the more I study history, the more, you know, I feel like human nature is like just coming out as like mostly just greedy and selfish and, like I said, destructive. That's why I think it's important to study history, because you learn about yourself, you know, humanity, you learn about tendencies, I guess, and you learn to recognize them, you know, when they crop up. You know, hopefully it would keep you from making, again, like the same mistakes. You know, that's always the thing about history, is they say you study it, you know, so that you don't repeat mistakes. But I feel like, you know, this stuff keeps happening over and over and over again as well. Anyway, I got got super philosophical there towards the end, but that's just kind of what I was thinking about, you know, with this video. Also, this Epic History series has been good, but it's just been a very, very top level overview of Alexander. I really don't know much about him as a person. Most of the details were skipped over. We just got a very, very short glimpse of his life and what he did and so forth. I'm definitely going to be looking into him more in the future and just learning a little bit more in depth kind of what he did and everything. We will be watching the speech that he did as well. I wonder if that's the speech that they were referring to about how he like gave this pep talk to his men, and there's like this emotional reconciliation is what it said, so I'm wondering if that's going to be the speech that they do. We'll get to that in the next few days, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Also make sure that you like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I have links to all my social media, Discord, Patreon in the description of this video and in my pinned comment if you're interested in any of that. Alexander here, and I say thanks for watching, and we will see you guys next time.